They whisper it like a warning passed between graves. If a man in a red hood takes a room at your tavern, someone in that town will lose their head before sunset. Not in battle nor in anger, but clean and deliberate, an act always meant to happen. So when he arrives, do not ask his name, do not meet his eyes, and whatever you do not attend the trial the next day. Because by dusk, someone will die, and it will not be the one the court intended. They call him many things: the Red Hood, the last verdict, the walking sentence. But the truth is far simpler. He is not a man who brings justice. He is what comes after justice fails. And if Jacub Krvarr is staying in your town tonight, then by morning, someone has already been judged. And welcome, traveler, to the Tavern on the Morrow, where all come to gather at the threshold to adventure. I'm your host and owner of this fine establishment, Ben Grimm. Not too long ago, I got back from a trip to Prague with my daughter. It was a wonderful bonding experience. I talked about it before in my previous video about Dominika Bolt. And there were a lot of fun stories and adventures we had there. And one night we went on a ghost tour. I like to go on ghost tours. I don't believe in ghosts, but I think ghost tours are a lot of fun because there's a history vibe with a little bit of supernatural fun to it. And one of the figures we learned about is a legendary gentleman from Prague who lived in the 17th century by the name of Jan Mydlar. Hope I haven't totally mispronounced that. But he was an executioner who was famous for the 27, I believe, executions he performed in one day, plus a rather grim backstory in which he tried to save his lover by becoming an executioner. He was actually a surgeon before that and thought it might be a good way to save her from dying by becoming an executioner, but he didn't. And instead of saving her, was in fact the very person who ended up killing her. And I thought, boy, does that make a fun and interesting villainous type background for an interesting NPC. And so in the pursuit of that, I have created my own variation of the Jan Mydlar myth. And I have called him Jacub Krvarr, and he is a tiefling. And he has a lot of similarities to Jan's mythical origins. But I have tried to add my own flavor to it. And have also, made him a tiefling, so those things should give him a little bit more distinction. I also wanted to create a character who was a little bit more direct in their application of violence. Some of the other videos I've done in the past, the NPCs tend to be a little bit more political, a little bit more spiritual in nature. Certainly, Jakub is morally gray. I really don't know what, the average party will have to decide whether they want to support Jakub or fight against him. You could easily make a case that he's doing things that are just, simply not lawful, or you could make a case that he is a rogue vigilante who needs to be stopped because he is a bloody murderer who is killing without sufficient proof. Either path will be really available to the player should this villain be chosen. But regardless, what you'll find in combat is someone who isn't necessarily sneaky. He is I think, really interestingly constructed, and we'll talk about that later in the video. But he is certainly sort of like a vengeance paladin or a warrior, very to the point and very aggressive and very physically violent. And so, without further ado, let's take a deeper look at Jacub Krvarr. We go now to the tavern tap room. Rain pounds the roof, and in the corner, a cluster of caravan travelers huddle close, voices low. I saw him on the roof, one mutters. Red hood. Didn't look at me, just kept walking. That means nothing, another says, but no one believes it. A woman leans in. Was he alone? Yes. Silence tightens around the table. An older driver stares into the lantern flame. If that's who I think it is, they're going to Drahamir's gate. Already too late. Stop, someone whispers. It's just stories. Stories don't wait for trials. A pause. There's a trial tomorrow, the old man adds. The lantern flickers. The main door creaks open. No one speaks. No one turns towards the door. But all of them are listening. They say there is a man who walks the long roads at dusk. A red hood pulled low over his face. An axe resting easily at his side. Some call him the last verdict, others the walking sentence. But once he had a different name. Jakub. Before the blood, before the whispers, Jacub Krvarr was a surgeon. His hands were steady, precise, trusted. He believed the world could be understood, and that every wound had a cause, and every cause an answer. And beside him always was Jacub Krvarr, his cousin, his secret, his heart. Jacub was different. She healed where others hesitated. She asked questions no one wanted answered. She studied things the world preferred to leave buried. And then they accused her. Witchcraft. They said a dead child spoke her name from behind a sealed door. They found strange herbs in her room, burned black, smelling faintly of iron. A symbol carved beneath her floorboards, something no priest could name. The animals feared her. The people whispered. And worst of all, they demanded answers. She did not deny it. Jakub refused to accept it. He searched for the truth the only way he knew how. He studied the bodies, he retraced the claims, he questioned every witness. But the deeper he looked, the less certain everything became. So he made a choice. To save her, he became what he hated, an apprentice executioner. Because executioners saw what others did not. He believed that if he stood close enough to the blade, he could stop it. He was wrong. The trial ended, the sentence was passed, and on the day of the execution, it was Jakub who stood behind her, a surgeon's hands holding an executioner's axe. She did not scream, she did not beg, she only looked at him and spoke words he has never remembered the same way twice. Sometimes she forgives him, sometimes she accuses him. The blade fell, clean, perfect, final. Years passed. Jakub became something else. A legend, a shadow in red, a man who carried out death with quiet, ritual precision. They feared him, and they should have, because then the truth began to surface. The child had not died of illness. The voice was likely grief or air or imagination. The herbs? Medicine, rare but not forbidden. The symbol beneath her floor was not a curse. It was anatomy, a diagram of the human body. Some witnesses had lied. Others had been mistaken. And Jacub had never been proven guilty. But neither had she ever been proven innocent. And that is what broke him. Because Jacub Krvarr does not know the truth. He does not know if he executed a witch or murdered the only person he ever loved. So now he hunts a different kind of prey. Not criminals, not monsters, but those who claim certainty. Judges, accusers, officials, anyone who would condemn another without doubt. Because doubt was the one thing they never allowed her. And Jacub Krvarr has learned something terrible, that justice is not found in truth, only in who is willing to act without it. So if you hear the sound of slow footsteps at dusk, if you see the red hood on the road ahead, pray not for mercy, but for doubt. Because if Jacub Krvarr is certain about you, your sentence has already been carried out. They expect a monster, a brute, a butcher, something wild. They are always wrong. Jacub Krvarr does not look like a killer. His features are refined, calm, almost noble. His skin is pale, touched faintly by something unnatural. And his eyes, quiet, focused, carry a dim, ember-like glow in the dark. There is no rage in them. His horns are not imposing. They curve back along his skull, slender and elegant. Easy to miss beneath the deep crimson hood he always wears. A hood that casts his face in shadow. A hood that separates the man from what he became. His clothing is simple, fitted and functional. Dark fabrics and clean lines, and always gloves. Leather, maintained and precise. He wears them the way a surgeon once did. Because that's what he was. And in many ways, still is. At his side rests a massive axe, not chipped, not crude, balanced and polished, cared for. It does not look like a weapon, it looks like a tool. In combat, Jakub does not move like a duelist. There is no flourish nor wasted motion. Every step is measured, every action intentional. When he raises the axe, it is already decided. And before the fight, he adjusts his gloves, not for show, not for fear, but out of habit. Because somewhere beneath the red hood, there is still a man who believes in precision, in correctness, in doing things the right way. That is what makes him terrifying. He does not kill in anger. He does not strike in chaos. He ends lives the same way he once saved them, with steady hands and, ironically, with absolute certainty. As I always do with all of the characters I create, I really would like to focus on developing some interesting and motivating goals for my NPCs. I want them to have agency and purpose, not just sort of random villains sort of doing things. I mean, I guess most villains have goals. That's pretty common, but I want to make sure I spend some time articulating these goals. In Jacob's case, one of his first and most sort of concerning activities, and what he's going to be sort of wandering the land doing, is he is very intent on making sure that there are no false accusations that he can prevent. So he wanders from town to town, sort of doing some, independent investigation. He is a smart fellow. He knows how to dig up information. He knows how to dig up leads, and he knows how to perceive what he thinks is the truth. And he will, then make determinations on his understanding of the evidence that he gathers as to whether or not someone who is being persecuted is being legitimately persecuted or being falsely persecuted. And the moment that Jacub feels that a victim of the system is at play, and he very often reaches that conclusion because he is very antagonistic towards judicial systems and the law. He's a bit of a chaotic figure. When he arrives at that conclusion, which is not inevitable but frequent, he will then take justice into his own hands. He is very intent on stopping any future executions or punishments of anyone he perceives as innocent, and instead just pawns or patsies delivered up by corrupt and fallible magistrates, judges, judicial systems, and so on. Which, of course, is a direct lead into his second major goal, which is to expose the corrupt mechanisms of machinery. Jacub is pretty convinced that Aliska was falsely accused. It takes the pressure off of his own conscience to a certain degree, even though he carried out the sentence. He allows himself the justification that he did that because he was also a pawn of the system, and now, because of that, he has made the system sort of an enemy that he is endlessly fighting. And so, town to town, city to city, he is looking for ways not just to prevent false persecutions from happening, but also to tear apart the machinery that allows for these things to happen. And so, who he goes after are magistrates, judges, clerks, officials, anyone in power who he considers complicit in a system that is, leading to false accusations, false imprisonment, and in worst case scenarios, false executions. And so that's a huge part of his goals. And he will hire players because he has resources, he has money that he has acquired over time, and he will hire a team of people to help him with these investigations, to dig up the dirt, to find the evidence that he needs to prove that the system is corrupt or to prove innocence. And that's a big part of how I think Jacub can work, is that he's a villain, strictly speaking, because he's a vigilante killing people without any kind of any explicit authority from any community. But many times he is right, and he's going to be a force in which he hires the players to do things. So he is both a villain and a patron, and I think the best way to use Jacub is to start him off as a patron and let the players sort of form a trust with him and believe in the integrity of his actions, and then as they see him becoming increasingly bloody and increasingly vigilante in nature, they can then make the decision, do we actually want to keep working with this guy or not? And I think in that level he can be a lot of fun as an NPC who shifts from maybe an admired figure to someone the players begin to dread and actively seek to turn against and stop. There's also a third element, which is Jacub's broken heart, and the question that Jacub has as to whether he legitimately killed his cousin or not. He is not someone who particularly supports witchcraft. If someone is accused of meddling in the dark arts, it is his belief that that person should be put to death. They are demon bound. They have a twisted dark heart. So if Aliska really was guilty of witchcraft, then he believes that his actions in executing her were fair, and he's in many ways relieved that it was his hand that did it. If she was wrongly accused, if she was falsely accused, he wants to know that as well. Although obviously that would lead to a much greater sort of personal pain for Jacob. But he wants to know the truth. All of his other failings aside, or perks aside, the one thing about Jacob is he does believe the truth matters and that the truth is out here in kind of an X-Files kind of way. And so he'll also employ the players to go, if it sort of comes up in the story, he wants to know if Aliska was guilty. Did she actually commit the crimes that she was guilty of? He's had a hard time finding the evidence that he wants. Initially, there was a lot of evidence that suggested she would, and that's why he agreed to finally be her killer. But as time passed, more and more evidence rolled in to suggest and cloud doubt over over that conviction, and suggest that she was innocent. And now Jacob is very confused about whether he did the right thing or not. And so, one thing he might do, especially if he feels the party is especially qualified to dig into a past that is many years gone now, is to go back to Drahomir's Gate and see what they can find out about Aliska's persecution. Can they go back to the places where she allegedly got her illicit materials? Can they recreate the rituals that she performed and prove whether they are demon-bound, dark, devilish in nature, or were they just alternate kinds of divine rituals that were benign or neutral in nature? Jacob is very much devoted to finding out the truth of Aliska's life and her purpose. And that's a major goal that he will be pursuing as a character. People say Jacub Krvarr never travels alone, not because anyone walks beside him, but because strange things happen in his presence. Reflections linger too long, whispers appear where no voice should exist, and sometimes, in mirrors, windows, or rainwater, there is a woman standing behind him, watching. Her name was Aliska Krvarr, his cousin, his lover, the woman he executed with his own hands. They accused her of witchcraft, and maybe they were right. That is the terrible part. Jacob never found the truth. But ever since the day her head fell beneath his axe, something has remained. Not a ghost, not exactly. More like a wound that never closed. When Jacob fights, it is said he moves before his enemies do, like someone whispers warnings into his ear. And in moments of judgment, people swear they hear a second voice speaking beside him, soft, feminine, and distant. But the most frightening stories are the simplest ones, because sometimes, when Jacob passes a darkened window at night, he glances toward the reflection, not to look at himself, but to see if Aliska is still there. I think Jacob could be a lot of fun for a GM to run in a combat scenario. And so what I did in crafting him is I wanted to hone in on a few key abilities that would sort of bring out that executioner flavor. And, when we think about an executioner, they're really dealing with one person at a time. And so one ability that I gave him was this thing called Mark of Final Judgment, which is a bonus action in which Jacob basically picks a target and then gets advantage plus some additional damage on that target. And he's got some additional movement powers that kind of make it a little bit easier for him to get around the battlefield. And so once Jacob makes a decision about which player or which target, depending on the nature of the fight, he wants to go after, he will relentlessly pursue that character. Now, given Jacob's past and his concerns about witchcraft and sorcery, he will probably target the sorcerer or the wizard or any kind of druid or cleric that he considers as being maybe not quite in line with his perceptions of morality or how he operates. Certainly any warlock he would be very, very skeptical of. And so in a fight, he's going to usually go after that person or anyone in the party that he views as being especially, he's not going to go after the chaotic people. He's going to go after the lawful people. So I guess in that sense, he might also go after the paladin. But regardless, what we're looking at with Jacob is someone who is going to sort of relentlessly pursue one character at a time and really try to just take one person out and then move on to the next person. That can become a bit stressful for whoever's targeted. He's also got this thing called Surgical Strike, which just, when he attacks a condemned target, he's going to have some bonus damage, some bleeding damage. So once he targets you, the damage is going to come pretty quickly, pretty relentlessly, and pretty brutally. And that, I think fits the aesthetic of an executioner, someone who doesn't kill slowly, doesn't take their time, but they are methodical and quick and very efficient. And that certainly is how Jakub's going to fight. So he moves around a lot, single target approach, hyper focused, and he's got some additional powers that make it a little bit easier for him to get around those who might be trying to stop him, such as his hood. So he's got this scarlet hood that he wears, and it's magical, perhaps imbued with some of the lingering essence of Aliska. There's this whole idea of her ghostly presence following him through the world, and maybe that's where he gets these extra powers, this necrotic damage that he does. But the hood has an aura of fear about it, and it's going to scare away the other players if they fail saves, and make it harder for them to act against Jakub. And that's going to make it easier for him to consistently pursue whoever he wants to kill. And it's, whoever that is, again, he's going to be after the person who's sort of most lawful or most sort of perceptibly corrupted by magic. And, that is going to really depend on the nature of your party. And because he's an executioner, I also gave him this power called Final Sentence, which is a recharge power. So he can't use it too much. But if he feels that he is ready to deal a decisive killing strike, if he feels like the target is nearing death, not on death's door, but on getting closer, let's say under half hit points, he'll definitely try to deliver the killing blow. And so this is a power that he can use once per recharge. And, if he's lucky, he does a boatload of damage and even stuns the target if they don't die. And that makes him a pretty lethal character. He's definitely designed to be a solo fight. I don't anticipate Jakub needing minions around him. It's going to be him versus a party of tier, of level 2 or not 2, level 3 or 4 characters, 3 or 4 of them. And I believe he's set up to be a very difficult fight. The kind of final fight that he would be a final fight. He's not someone you're going to battle on early, because again, initially he's going to be trusted as an ally or a patron, and it is only through time spent with him that the players may decide, nope, this guy's corrupt, or maybe they want to work with him, in which case they're going to have a really powerful ally against whoever they end up fighting. If you're interested in accessing and downloading the various PDFs, documents, character sheets, stat blocks, and other things that I have generated for this video and others, you can find a link to that information and those downloads in the description of this video and the other videos as well. And if you subscribe to Tavern on the Morrow in the next 5 seconds, your next roll will be a critical success. We return now to the tavern, where the door never actually opened. No sound, no reason for the silence that settled over the group of caravan travelers. See? Someone mutters, but no one moves. The old driver's gaze shifts, not to the door, but to the window. Outside, through the rain, a rider passes. A red hood, his movements mechanical and steady. He doesn't look towards the tavern, nor does he hesitate. He just continues on. The lantern flickers. No one speaks, because now they understand. He isn't looking for them. His prey lies further down the road.